Hello everyone. I want to talk a little bit about my experiences around being fucked on drugs, being stuck in active addiction. Now, if no one doesn't know my story, I am Paul and I am an addict. Now, I've struggled with drug abuse all my life. I've been in recovery for the last 10 years, last 11, 12 years, and drugs have not a problem, they're not a problem no more, but they used to be. Now, I want to talk a little bit about back in the day and how fucked I was on drugs. Now, how I can explain what I was like in active addiction is your local heroin addict, your local crackhead. That's what I looked like. That's exactly how I looked like. I literally looked like a head on legs, man. I looked weird. I was thin, frail, drawn in, unhealthy, funny colour, scruffy, smelly. Yeah, that's exactly what I was like. My drug of choice was cocaine. By the time I was 16, 17, I was sniffing coke for 2 and 3 days, going on 2 or 3 day benders, coming home, back in the gym, trying to stay healthy, and then bang, Thursday, Friday, Saturday out again, sometimes the Sunday. And that was running up to till I was about 19, 20 year old. By the time I was 19, 20 year old, I was sniffing coke every day. I was sniffing coke every single day. But I was smoking weed, taking tablets, uppers, downers and all around us. Now, by the time I was 20, I become a little bit of an undercover crackhead. When the sessions were dying on the cocaine and all the normal lads were leaving and going home, I tend to find that I was the last one standing. And then I would start to sneak off into some dark, seedy, sneaky places, i.e. crack houses. And I remember always being in these crack houses and start getting paranoid and saying, listen, I wasn't here. Don't be telling no one that I've been here. Don't want no one knowing. No one knows I'm a crackhead. And that was going on for months and months and months. Until one day, I was sat in this crack house and I was saying the same shit over and over again. Don't be telling no one I'm here. No one knows that I smoke crack. And this crackhead stood up and went, Paul, everyone knows you smoke crack. Come on, mate. Everyone knows you're on it. Everyone talks about it. Everyone knows. And it was a harsh realisation of, you're not an undercover crackhead no more, Paul. You're just a crackhead now, mate. Like, just face it. It is what it is. You're either going to do something about it or you're not. I'm still sniffing coke, sniffing MCAT, but mainly the crack. That was my go-to drug towards the end. Every time I got to the back end of my session, 2 or 3 day bender, I'd always end up on the pipe. Always. And this was the demise of me. By the time I was 20 and 21, I was in a very vulnerable state. You've got to understand as well how vulnerable I was, because by the time I was between 17 and 19, I was a big strong lad. I was a tough lad, and I was using that to my advantage. Yeah, I was a bully. I was doing nasty stuff and naughty stuff to people who, regardless of what they were doing and how they were living, probably didn't deserve it. But I did it anyway. After that, on my downhill spiral, I started to become very vulnerable. I was a shadow of myself. I started getting targeted. These people who I'd harmed and done wrong to, were coming out the woodworks and targeting me, and I was fucking struggling to defend myself. Like I said, I was in a very vulnerable state. But like I said, towards the back end of it, it got really heavy to the point where my house got blasted. People were targeting me. I was getting jumped. I was in hospital week in, week out. Things were going wrong massively. But my family getting targeted was just the final straw, because I knew what type of person I'd become. I was this type of person that didn't give a shit about anyone and anything around him. All he cared about was himself. I had 3 beautiful kids and a wife I didn't give a shit about. And that's just harsh truth about it, That I chose addiction, I chose drugs over them, and sometimes I struggle to forgive myself for that today. I really do. If there's anything that I struggle with today, if there's anything that keeps me awake, it's that stuff. The things I did, the neglect that I did to my family, the trauma that's left with them over my actions and the things that I did. That's the stuff that I'll always hold on to. That's the stuff that I'll find I've forgiven myself for. But hey, look, I'll work hard every single day. I have a God in my life that can help me with that stuff. So yeah, I mean, like I said, the final straw was when my house got blasted. People were targeting my family. You know, I decided to take matters in my own hands, and long story short, I ended up in prison. All the way through prison I used. I sniffed Subutex, I took Zopiclone, I smoked weed. All the way through my prison sentence, all the way through it. You know, when I got out, I was not in a better place. And they decided to put me in a hostel. Now, I went in this hostel for 6 months, but with good behaviour, that gets halved. You'd be out within 3. I was not good. I kept using, I was still sniffing MCAT, I was still smoking crack, I was still failing drug tests left, right and centre. You know, and I was on my last warning, and I fucking knew that I was going to end up going back and serving the rest of my time. I just felt like I'm fucked here, like I can't get out of it. I'm stuck in this cycle here, and I fucking hate myself for it. You know, and thank God for my mother. Thank God for my mother. You know, my mum carried this message of recovery, carried this message of NA to me. And I know she won't mind me breaking in anonymity because she's Mrs. NA in Middlesbrough. You know, my mum is Mrs. NA. She's fucking absolutely fabulous. And she carried this message to me and said, look, Paul, you do something about it. Give yourself a chance. Just come to these meetings. You've got nothing else to lose. And I just thought, yeah, do you know what? She's right. She's right. And I went to these meetings, Narcotics Anonymous, 12-step program. I went to these meetings and the rest was history. The rest was history. I learned a lot about myself getting into recovery. I learned that I definitely wasn't wired up right as a child. You know, that being said, look, everything I did was my fault. You know, I was a selfish cunt and I chose to take drugs regardless of how my mind works or regardless of how I felt. You know, at the end of the day, I know now that my opinion, like, listen, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but I believe I was born an addict. I believe I was born with something not right in here. You know, when I got into recovery and I started to put pen to paper, I started to write, I started to realise what I was, denial was gone. You know, I started to get grateful. I started to realise, you know, there's a solution to my problem here, and it certainly isn't drugs. You know, and it was NA, it was recovery, it was fellowship. And I started to work a program. I started to do the writing, I started to do the work, I got myself a sponsor, you know, I attended meetings regularly. And I started to find that, you know, I started to love myself again. You know, because I hated who I was, I hated who I'd become, you know, to the point where I didn't want to be here no more. You know, I'd even tried, you know, to remove myself from this planet, you know, unsuccessfully. Fuck knows how, because it took enough to fucking kill an horse. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Yeah, so I quickly found out that, you know, I started to realise that something wasn't quite right in here. You know, even as a child, I felt different. Even as a child, I felt something wasn't quite right. You know, I often thought like what it would be like to die. You know, I had issues with food. You know, I had issues with wanting to be liked. You know, low self-esteem, low self-worth. You know, I was very judgmental on myself. You know, even as a child, and I didn't know this, but when I'd done the writing and then looked back through my childhood, I realised, you know what, Paul, you was fucking destined to be an addict. You know, you're always going to be something, one way or another, suffering with obsession and compulsion, you know, to change the way I feel, and that's fact. Now that's it's not fact. It's fact in my head. It's just what I believe. So yeah, fellowship gave me my life back. You know, it gave me a chance to be a good dad. Give me a chance to be a good fella to my missus, a good son, a good brother, and a fucking good friend. You know, all these things. I believe fellowship never changed me. I believe it just took layers away, and I was left with me, who I was always meant to be. You know, this tough exterior, this shit that I had hanging over me, you know, that kept me horrible, fueled by ego and pride and reputation. You know, this stuff that had me fooled and living in a fantasy world was gone. It all got removed when I went into fellowship and I was left with me. The onion effect, all these layers were stripped away and I was left with me. You know, and I'll forever be grateful. I owe my life to fellowship. My opinion, it should be taught in schools. It should be taught, it should be advertised, it should be everywhere. But that's not how it works. You know, fellowship works, it's attraction rather than promotion. And my mother stood so attractive to me, the fact that I wanted what she had. You know, I needed what she had. And what was on offer, all come true. You know, when I walked in them rooms, I was promised a life beyond my wildest dreams. You know, I didn't know what that meant. I really thought someone was going to give me a bag of money or buy me a car or house or something along them lines. But no, I knew what that meant when I picked a 90-day chip up. When I picked a 90-day chip up, I couldn't remember the last time I thought about drugs. I couldn't remember the last time I obsessed around getting off my head. And I knew I was there. I had this chip and I thought, yes, I've fucking done it. Like, I can't remember the last time I obsessed around drugs. You know, I'm sleeping perfect, life's good, you know, the sky's blue, the grass is green, can hear the birds singing, don't mind if it's raining, don't mind if it's sunny. Nothing could fuck me over. Nothing. I had the blinkers on and I was focusing on recovery and everything was working fine. I was building that bridge to a normal living and it was amazing. The moral of the story is, if you're struggling with active addiction, trust me, there is a way out. If you know someone who's struggling with active addiction, tell them about NA. Tell them there's a program and there's a solution to their problem. And it fucking works if you work it. 100%. All you've got to do is go. You don't need to stop using. You don't need to be in a good place. You just need to fucking get yourself there, park your ass and look for the similarities and not the differences. And eventually something will happen. Something will change. Eventually, you know, it's the same old saying, you sit in the hairdresser long enough, you get an haircut. If you sit in them meetings for long enough, something will rub off on you. I'm telling you now, it's a power beyond my wildest means that I could ever imagine what goes on in them rooms. You know, I didn't have God when I walked in them rooms, but I knew there was something special, something spiritual going on in them rooms. And I absolutely loved it. And I'll forever be grateful for him. God bless, guys. Thank you for listening to me. Take care.